Happy Tuesday, Bernadette. It's the return of Hummingbird Hour, and you're my first guest.
Hey, Brian, it's great to see you, and I'm thrilled to be here. Happy day after National Coming Out Day.
I'm so glad you mentioned it's national, or it's the day after National Coming Out Day, because I wore this shirt special. It's for those of you who can see the little tiny design. This was a Target-inspired Pride design shirt, and it has little rainbow ice cream cones.
Oh, that's really cute. I like that idea. I like that style.
The Target collection was really fun this year. So
Target had a partnership with the Fluid Project, which is a LGBTQ owned company, and I think that the Fluid Project did a lot of their designs. So they're being very authentic, which I appreciate. They're not just being designed by someone who thinks they know our community.
They're actually members of the community. Yeah, of course, Rob and the team at the Fluid Project are doing fantastic work,
Right.
and love seeing their work continue to open doors and conversations for members, particularly of the transgender and non-binary community, and for gender fluidity in fashion.
Yeah.
We're going to sidebar for a second because that's what we get to do on Hummingbird Hour. Rob actually posted an article yesterday that I thought was really cool, that California is going to require toy stores that have toy collections to provide a gender neutral experience for the kids, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I think that it's a bill. We'll see if it becomes a law, but I think that it's definitely cool. I mean, California is leading the way with so many progressive public policies. Hopefully they'll make their way to Illinois soon.
Well, and I think I don't want to knock my new home state too much, but I think you're probably closer to getting that in Illinois than we are in Florida. But I will do my part to drive the conversations here in Florida. So, well, again, Bernadette, I'm so excited that you're here with me today as we launch the Return to Hummingbird Hour. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'll give you just a quick history lesson. And I promise this is a quick history lesson, and it's not going to be hopefully a boring one. So I launched Hummingbird Humanity 18 months ago with a live conversation series called Hope, Heart, and the Human Spirit. And a year later, which was this past May, we returned to another live conversation series called Hummingbird Hour, and we did that for 3 months in honor of our 1-year anniversary. And we heard so many good things that we decided to make this a monthly conversation. And so I am going to be inviting friends and thought leaders and colleagues and people who are making a difference in the world to join me for a monthly conversation. And for this first series of guests, I'm inviting my friends who have written books that are going to help make the world a better place. And Bernadette, you wrote a book.
Yes, this is my book. It's my book. Yes, thank you for buying my book, Brian. I love this book. I'm really proud of this book. You know, after all of the times that I've had to read this book, write the book, read the book, like read it again and again and again during the editing process, I still really like this book. And I feel like that says something. I'm not sick of it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and it's got a super cool cover.
Thank you.
Which is really what it's all about, right? It's just about the cover.
Very eye-catching. Yes, I love the cover. It was like love at first sight with the cover.
And it feels like there's something I like about the feel of the book too. So, well, we're going to come back and talk more about the book, and I'm going to ask you all sorts of questions about the book. I even have my pages tabbed and stuff. So we're going to do that. But let's get to know you a little bit, because of course I know you well, but I'm going to guess that, and I hope that there's someone here who's like, I'm meeting this amazing woman for the first time. So, you want to tell us, because I know you have a super cool story of how you got into DEI work. Would you share with the audience?
Sure. All right. So I was living in Boston, Massachusetts in 2004 when the state Supreme Court ruled that it was illegal to discriminate against same-sex couples who wanted to get married. And so the people, the haters, protested at the State House, and they were trying to change the Constitution, to amend the Constitution to ban same-sex marriage before the law went into effect. So I was working at a nonprofit, I was planning events, and I would take long lunches. I would go to the State House after work. I would go to these hearings, be part of these protests. And at some point, I just realized that this is going to happen. And all of those couples that I see, some of whom had been together for decades, were going to need to plan a wedding, but they could be facing discrimination. And so I decided right then and there on the Massachusetts State House steps, I'm going to be a gay wedding planner. And I started a business to be an activist wedding planner, to really help couples navigate a very traditional industry, a very heteronormative industry. And especially back then, when only about a third of Americans even supported marriage equality. This was the first state in the country. And there were a lot of things that could go wrong. So I started this business. Things were going really well. Over time, I had a business coach tell me that I could have a much bigger impact on the world if I started helping other wedding professionals understand this community, understand this market, so they could be sensitive. So I ended up doing lots of speaking and training. I wrote 3 books about same-sex wedding planning. I created a certificate course for the wedding and travel communities, spoke at all of the conferences, all of the stuff in those industries, and moved to New York, started planning weddings there. And when the law changed, and ultimately, one day I was in New York and looking around, I'm like planning these luxury 6-figure weddings in Manhattan and on Fire Island, and just feeling like I've lost my sense of activism. I'm all of a sudden, what I'm doing is not special anymore. It's about the wedding, it's about the couple, and that's wonderful. But it didn't fuel my sense of purpose anymore. Because, I didn't get into it for the weddings. I got into it for the activism. I was a pretty good planner, but it certainly wasn't my greatest passion. Also around that time, I got divorced and, ended up moving to Chicago for new love. And I decided, I'm not going to rebuild my business again in a new city, and I'm not going to keep traveling back to New York to plan these weddings. And so I decided to just phase out that part of my business and keep building up the speaking and training. So I kept doing that and eventually evolved my business away from LGBTQ and away from weddings and travel and hospitality. And I retired as a wedding planner. And my business now is really focused on helping all types of organizations understand all types of people, and just focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion in a much more broader way. And I love what I do. That's the story. I'm a retired wedding planner, and thank goodness, last year would have been a nightmare if I was a wedding planner.
Oh, can you imagine? Well, yeah, it's yeah, I can't. Well, my head just went to all these places. One of those places was I launched Hummingbird Humanity in a pandemic, and I'm like, oh, people want us to do things in person now. It's a whole new ball game. So at least you've done things in person before. So you're like, I know what this looks like.
Yeah, I've done a lot in person.
I love it. Well, I love that story though and that I just sort of gave a glimpse into my story, or piece of my story of, how we each find our ways to this work is unique and different, I think, for everyone. And there are more people, I think, today who are starting to pursue a DEI career when they go to college or when they come out of college. But that wasn't a thing that I remember back when I was starting my professional career in HR. And so many of us have just found our ways to this work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm an entrepreneur. Like I am totally meant to build businesses, and I love it. And I love that I get to do this work with a strong sense of purpose. It's very fulfilling. I love, love, love what I do. And honestly, all of those years with weddings, I had a sense of purpose in the beginning, certainly. And then I had a client who was a transgender woman, and she hired me in 2010 to help her become the bride she'd always dreamed of. She was about 60 years old. She came out a few years before that and was living her authentic self. She had been CFO of a company and was fired for being trans because there were no protections in employment in Massachusetts at the time. She was afraid of experiencing discrimination when planning. She was afraid that she was going to be misgendered, that her shoulders were too broad, she didn't have hips. She had all of these fears about her guests' experience at the wedding venue and about family reaction, like all of these layers of fears. And it was a spectacular wedding that she was walked down the aisle in this church by her 85-year-old father to a performance by the Boston Gay Men's Chorus. And it was absolutely amazing. And I know that I helped her become the bride she'd always dreamed of. And she's the reason that I love this work, because through Joanne, I learned that I have the ability to create spaces where people can feel safe enough to be authentically themselves. And that is my purpose. And so I have a picture of Joanne back from the wedding days up on my cork board, because it's so important to stay in tune with your sense of purpose when doing this work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm curious, what are the similarities between the activism work that you were doing with same-sex weddings and for those the weddings for members of the LGBTQ+ community, and the work that you do now with companies and organizations? Are there things that are real overlaps there?
Yeah, I mean, the work I was doing with organizations then, because I worked with, all the major hotels, private catering companies, et cetera, right? So the work I was doing then was about both changing the policies and changing the forms and changing the standards so that inclusion was the default, and also changing the customer experience. And so for me, there's a really strong correlation. You have to have all of your policies in line on the back end so that you don't default to bias, because we do. And you also have to have inclusion built into your customer service on the front end or your employee relations on the front end, because that's fulfilling the promise. Like there's got to be that alignment. And that's what I talk to companies about today. And all of the work that we do is really about both policies, internal and external. And don't forget about the customer experience, the client experience.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing that story, because of course I do this work, and I hadn't sort of thought through what are all the other implications. Now I wish that we didn't have to use the word implications for a same-sex wedding that's going to be at a venue, but the reality is there's all of those. How is that going to change even just like the welcome baskets or bags that say his and hers, right? That's right. Thank you for trying to be special, to help us feel special, but it's not a his and hers, it's a his and his, or hers and hers, or theirs and theirs. Right. And those things that are, as you mentioned, those are biases that we have, like that is the standard. And it may be the majority, but it doesn't include everyone. That's right. And it can really exclude people. I mean, it can make those types of biases, those types of overlooked details can really upset a couple, make them feel very othered. And it really matters. They're spending a lot of money, and this stuff really matters. I had a training for a hotel group down in Florida a few years ago,
mean, this was probably 5 years ago, but I'd been doing the work for a long time. And I got to my room and they had this delightful amenity. They had delivered chocolate covered strawberries to me, knowing that I was doing this LGBTQ training the next day. And one of the strawberries was a bride and one was a groom. So I'm like, all right.
Good try.
That's the one thing I miss about doing the work at hotels though, Brian. I stayed in a lot of really nice hotels, received a lot of really nice amenities. That was a kind of a nice perk from those industries.
We love a good perk.
Oh, love the swag.
Swag is the best. I love it. I love it. I'm trying to think, when was the last time I stayed in a hotel? Do people still do that? Is that a thing? The return to the real world after COVID. Okay, so let's spend some time talking about the book. So first of all, we're going to start with, I'm curious about the inspiration for the cover. What did you tell the designer?
I should look back at the email I sent the designer. I don't know. I think what I did say is that I wanted to write a book that was very approachable. I wanted to make DEI like easy. And my designer has no clue about this issue. Like he's just a designer. He's not invested in this in any way. Really great guy. I worked with him on my other books as well. Anyway, this is the first thing he gave me, and it's almost, he made some very minor changes, and I don't know, there was something about it that just felt right. I said to him, or I said to the people in my life, I didn't expect to like this, but I do, and I don't know, it's just it feels very friendly, I guess.
It does feel friendly. I think that's a great word. It feels it feels inviting. It almost feels like I'm being invited to a bit of a party of like, let's, yeah. And you know what? DEI gets a bad rap for being, and I'm not saying the work is easy. It takes attention and time and energy and emotion, sure, and all those things, but it can be fun. And this feels a bit fun.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's definitely fun and friendly. And I think that all of the shapes and colors he must have thought represent diversity, which they do. That may not have been intentional. I truly don't know, but that works as well. So, we all come in different shapes and sizes and colors.
I love it. So was this the easiest decision of the book when you got the design?
Probably. I mean, I kept trying to kind of talk myself out of it, but I couldn't find a reason to fight it because I just felt right. Yeah. Yes, this was probably the easiest thing because, as you know, bringing a book into the world is quite a feat, and there are seemingly infinite decisions, and it's very easy to overthink things. And also, there's a lot that can go wrong, and the typos seem infinite.
It's like the never-ending story. Yeah. For those of you who are watching who may not know, I'm also writing a book, so I'm 6 months away from the book release. So I figure, when we have these conversations for Hummingbird Hour, something that as Bernadette just mentioned, that I'm learning, and she of course is a experienced author. This is your 4th book, is that right, Bernadette? Mm-hmm. So I will have my first one, so I'm gonna learn from some of my fellow authors and friends and people who offer inspiration. And I also think that for those of you watching, if you're like, I'm thinking I could write a book someday, like I also hope that what we can share is like, it's possible. Like it can't, yes, there's a lot to it, but it can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be done. And you have it in you. I mean, I learned through this book that I have the capacity for much more discipline than I ever expected of myself. I had, told myself for years that I just didn't have discipline. it turns out that I actually can have discipline. And so, you know, who knows?
Shocking surprise.
Who knows what I'm capable of now that I've developed that skill. So, yeah.
Well, and in full transparency, I have outsourced the discipline and out there. So let's just own the things that we're good at and the things that we're not. So
now I'm talking about the writing. Yeah.
And so I know you have is it a weekly column that you produce? Tell us the scoop, because I know that's also a trick in how to write a book is something how you pull those together.
Yeah, so for the past 2.5 years, I've written a weekly newsletter called 5 Things, and it goes out on Saturday mornings. And the idea behind 5 Things is that I want to share good vibes in DEI, like good news, because what I have found in a lot of the research that I've done and all of the stories that I read is that there's just a lot of negative data. There's a lot of stories about what's going wrong related to DEI. But there are also a lot of really cool things happening, a lot of things that are going right. And so I decided that I was going to find 5 stories every week that represent what's going right in DEI or CSR, corporate social responsibility. Some of these are public policies. Some of these are things that companies are doing. They're things which I find inspirational, which I want to share because I want to lead with aspiration and hope, not with fear. And so I send out these weekly newsletters, and it's really become a passion project. I love it, and I have a really high open rate. People write me sweet notes, and they tell me how much this helps them, find the light, and it feels really good. It feels really good to bring that kind of inspiration to the world on a weekly basis. On Mondays, I have a guest join me on LinkedIn Live for 5 Things in 15 minutes. And so we talk about the 5 things and we just sort of riff on the stories, and we bring good vibes to start the work week for 5 Things in 15 minutes. And so I've been collecting all of these stories with, a pretty consistent habit. And so the stories are in the book. You're going to read really good examples of things that are going right, policies that actually work from brands that you probably know. And through those stories, there's a roadmap of how to move your organization forward towards greater inclusion in a comprehensive way, in a holistic way. And so it's a book about solutions, about how to actually get it done.
And solutions is actually there in the title.
Sure is.
Proven solutions for an equitable organization. So let's talk about a little bit about the words that are on the cover, because I know they all mean something. So talk to us about why it's called Inclusive 360.
It's called Inclusive 360 because it's not a book about only HR. It's a book that also has diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies for procurement, for marketing, for product design, for meetings and events. It's for people in customer service, people at call centers. So it's really about taking a holistic approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the vision is that there are truly solutions for every department. So the whole organization can work on DEI initiatives simultaneously and move the organization forward in a very aligned and comprehensive way. And I just think that DEI should not be an HR function. I just think it's bigger. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I know as we were preparing for today's conversation, I shared that we have a framework we use at Hummingbird, which we call the 4 lenses of representation, and the lenses of people, culture, customers, and community. And it's the goal there is to try to amplify or to elevate that a similar version of this conversation of what I've seen and heard and experienced is the conversations are so much about like, do I have people that look different that work at the company? And yes, like that's important. We want that. And there's a lot of other things that need to come together for it to all work. It needs to be, as my friend DK Bartley at Moody's, the chief diversity officer at Moody's, says the DEI needs to be in our DNA. Like, it has to be part of everything.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's not authentic, right?
That's right. That's right. And so that's truly, it needs to be authentic. It needs to be aligned. And in order for it to build the kind of brand loyalty, in order for companies to build the kind of brand loyalty and employee loyalty, that it all has to come together. And there needs to be all of this plus a sense of purpose that they can get behind.
Where do I want to go next? Okay, so I have so many questions here. So let's carry on that thread of a sense of purpose for a second. So, you know, we've talked about this book, that it's a big undertaking. It's possible. It's a big undertaking. There's a million decisions, and it can feel daunting. And I know you, like I, do this work because you believe in it. So how does purpose drive you as a business, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as an author? How does that factor into how you work and how you show up?
It is the foundation of everything, because, you know, just like me, we write our own paychecks, and the hustle is real, right? I mean, Brian, you and I work with big companies. Like, you have to earn that, and you have to hustle to earn it. And without a sense of purpose as a foundation for this work, we wouldn't make any progress. We have to stay deeply in touch with our own why to refuel, because it can be a hard and lonely world as entrepreneurs. And also, you know, I'm glad that I have you as a friend. I'm glad that I can text you, and I'm glad that you are part of my community, because we need each other, right? And that's incredibly important and valuable to me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and ditto, because I feel like we need to have like the hashtag "the hustle is real," because that is so true. And you know, and what I have found that as I have, you know, leaned into this, the entrepreneur side of this work, because of course I was a head of DEI in-house before I became a consultant, is it can be easy to get sidetracked into the feeling of scarcity, those moments of fear of like, is the revenue going to come in so I can pay the bills and keep the lights on? And yeah. and I'm fortunate and I'm good, but I'm still human, and I still have those moments of fear. Yeah. And what I find is, as I'm making decisions about the work we do, if I'm led by scarcity, if I'm led by fear, if I'm led by like global domination, so let's just say that what that means, ego, like those things are like they start to feel inauthentic. So the good news for me is I've created that internal mechanism, so that way I can be like, oh, I'm off track. I need to like get back in my zone. And I don't mind doing the work. This is the hardest job I've ever done in my life, as an entrepreneur doing DEI work. And I'm like grateful that I get to get up and do it. So that helps.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you said a lot of things there that I could really chew on. I mean, I feel you about the I lost it.
Those moments of magic, and then they're like fleeting, and then they fly away.
The scarcity mindset, though, that really spoke to me, because, you know, I grew up with immigrant parents. I always had a scarcity mindset, and that was something that I had to really work hard to overcome. And once I did, I've been in such great flow. But I spent, you know, like probably 2 or 3 years, like really aggressively fighting my scarcity mindset by doing like exercises from the book, You're a Badass at Making Money. That is the truth, folks. I love the book. You're a badass at making money. Do the exercises. They will change your life.
I love it. I love it.
But you're right. I mean, you have to have that. First of all, it can't be about the money. It has to be about the purpose. And it can't be about sales. It has to be about service. I mean, there's lots of like mental switches you have to make to be in the right mindset to have those types of things not cause constant stress. I mean, once I let go of that kind of crap, once I let go and made peace with it, I've just been like a much happier person.
Yeah. And that was one of the reasons why I definitely made more money in my in-house roles the last few years. Let's own that. I am happier now. So, and I make less, right? But I'm focused on purpose, and being of value. And I'm a human. I have my moments where I'm like, oh wait, I need to get back on track. But like, I have that mechanism because I want to feel good about what I do. So, and just like you, I'm so grateful for the people in our community that we amplify each other, we support each other. I didn't know this because I missed that, must have missed it. You were sharing just before the call that you shared about My Grown-Ups, the children's book we released, and one of your 5 things, which I love because it's such a great story about different types of families and different grown-ups who raise beautiful humans. So thank you for doing that because we all support each other. And recently you and Jennifer Brown and I were on a text thread together, celebrating each other. And those moments, like, those make a big difference.
They do. And they make us feel less alone, or they make me feel less alone. And later today I have a mastermind group. I'm in a little mastermind group, and we are there to bounce ideas off each other and test ideas on. And it means a lot. And I mean, it's not just about the DEI work. It's about all of the other stuff that goes along with being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So for those of you who were watching thinking that you were just going to get a conversation about DEI, you're getting behind the scenes of the mind and life of entrepreneurs. So bonus.
Absolutely. Well, it's I think that I love that you mentioned that, Bernadette, because there's this reality that I don't know how to do this work, and really have never known how to do this work or any work that I do without, like, what's the human part of it, right? Like, here's the thing, like, you and I both can be proud of the work we do. We do work that makes an impact. We're also learning every day. We're growing every day. We have good days and bad days, right? And we're also authors. So sometimes people are like, well, they must be all like perfect and together. And like, that is not true. We're just humans, just like everyone else. But I also think when we bring our humanity to the work and that realness, we can do better work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad you said that, because honestly, Brian, when I was transitioning out of being in the wedding industry and into my broader DEI career, and I had just gone through a divorce, I still had like a few random weddings back in New York. And I didn't tell my clients that I was going through a divorce. I was sort of like one foot in both worlds, and feeling like I was being very, like I was holding back. I was totally covering. I definitely wasn't authentic. And it meant that I was detached. It meant that I wasn't present. I was checked out, and I definitely didn't do my best work. And I felt like a fraud. Like, and I have words for all of these right now, all of this. But when I was in the thick of it, I was just like, didn't even know what. I just thought I don't know. I didn't see a way out except to really be honest about my divorce and about my move. I was planning weddings with clients in New York who still thought I lived in New York and I was living in Chicago. Like, that's kind of shady, right?
Hey, it sounds like you're human. You're like, I'm trying to keep the lights on and I got to run a business, so I'm going to pretend I'm a New Yorker.
And so, but now I can talk about all this stuff. And now that I'm doing the work that I'm really passionate about and I'm feeling super aligned and super authentic, again, I'm just in this great state of flow. And it started with just being honest about where I was and saying, I kind of am in the middle of a professional identity crisis here.
I get that. Well, and I appreciate you continuing to just be authentic and honest and real. I'll share something that happened this summer for me. I decided to start a new life, which this decision started, was almost, decided at the beginning of the calendar year, but I made my move this summer from the Northeast. I'd been a New Yorker for most of the last 16, 17 years, and now I live in Fort Lauderdale. And this is not my first big life move, but I forgot or didn't focus on, because I was probably focused on the work at Hummingbird and that work. I forgot what it's like to be in a new place and with all new sights and sounds and people, and I have to figure out how to turn on the electric and the water and find a new doctor and all that stuff. And I ended up having sparking an episode of depression in July, and I was trying to keep running as an entrepreneur, and I finally I had to take a break because I had a vacation that had been planned, and I just stopped. And then when I stopped, and I was I told the story, people were like, it's okay, you needed to take a break. And I think we forget that sometimes. So and I think for us in this work, it's also important for us to model that it's okay to be human, it's okay to be real, it's okay to be authentic, it's okay to have a rough day.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Can I ask you, how plugged in were you during your break? Did you check email? Did you turn on your laptop? What were your boundaries?
That's a great question. So it was planned to be a 2-week trip. So week 1, I didn't check email. I just, I had one workshop that just the way the scheduling worked, I had to facilitate this 90-minute live work session on Zoom. But other than that, I didn't work at all during the first week. And then the second week, I decided to navigate a bit of touring Athens and then doing some catch up in the evenings on email. So that would just help to sort of segue back to work. But I'm a big believer that you have to be able to take a legit, disconnected break for mind, body, and soul.
Yes, I agree. And I took 2 vacations this year and did not disconnect. I mean, I didn't turn on my laptop, but I definitely was responding to emails. Even when I had my out of office on, I was still dealing with some stuff. And I don't want to be that person. I want to be better at completely detaching and not checking, but I'm still kind of going through I guess, let me just say, when you're a wedding planner, you got to be on.
Sure.
Your clients expect you to respond, right? And so I had that really strong sense of urgency and top-notch customer service for years. But now I don't get emails from clients at 9:00 at night. The boundaries are much better if I would let them to be better myself, if I could be better about them,
Yes. Well, it's hard. But I've actually, well, the thing that I said, and I posted about that trip on LinkedIn, and something that I experienced while I was away was nothing imploded.
Right.
It was okay.
Yep.
The team kept the things going that needed to keep going, and my clients, who I'm grateful that I have really fantastic clients, that we have fantastic clients. They're like, Brian needed a break. We're going to let Brian take a break. He works hard for us, and now he gets to take his break. So that, being able to realize it was all going to be okay is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And I know that. I totally know that intellectually. an awesome team. And yet, but this is something I commit to doing better on. Heather and I have a vacation planned for February, and that one I'm gonna really, I promise.
Take a break, because you just released a book. You got to take a break. You gotta recover from that break. So I love that we went from like, let's talk about a book, let's talk about DEI, let's talk about being human, let's do a little bit of a therapy coaching session. But I do want to come back to one of the words that's on the cover here, that is the word equitable. And I love that we're like, let's make sure we see the cover. See, it's a fun book. Equitable or equity, that's a word that gets confused a lot. I'm curious how you describe equity and your work, and then also how that comes to life in what you've captured in the book.
Yeah, okay, sure. And also my company is called Equality Institute. And so people are like, oh, what's the difference? And so so for me, from the way I describe equity is resources and support and changing the policies to make it right for historically marginalized and underrepresented groups. And not only to fix the current process, but also to make up for historical inequities. And so for me, equity is really at the heart of systems change. It's at the heart of policy. And that to me is what equity is about. It's about policy. And my company is called Equality Institute. And you cannot achieve equality without equity. Equality is sort of the aspirational goal. It is the best case scenario, and we are really, really far from it. And one of the ways you get there is through equity, through programs that create more equity.
I find that equity is one of the more controversial, or possibly the most controversial part of this work. Although, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is where you and I fit. I know some of our colleagues also have expertise in what would be racial justice, or which I don't claim to have that expertise, but for me, that's also a amplified conversation on equity, but those conversations are controversial, and because my experience is that people have different perspectives on what's okay in righting the wrongs or resetting the systems.
Of course, because a lot of people have fear that if the wrongs are righted and the systems are reset, then there will be less for them. Right. And so equity feels threatening to a lot of people with scarcity mindset, who might not be aware of their privileges, who might not really see the bigger picture. And it's a process we learn. I probably used to be like that in some ways, right? It's about really understanding that when we expand the pie, there's more pie for everyone. And equity is really about, at the end of the day, it's about righting wrongs. And I think it does require an abundance mindset, to be perfectly honest.
It does. You're absolutely right. I do. I love that you mentioned pie. One of my, and I'm going to see if I can quote this meme right. It's the equal rights doesn't mean less for you. It's not pie.
Right. Exactly.
Which is also true of, but you have to believe in the abundance mindset, or I know another one of our colleagues, I don't know if you know Josh and Michael Saderman and Nettie Nitzberg, they run Saderman Connect, but we've explored some partnerships, and one of the things we've talked about is we're also in some ways competitors, and so then we're like, why aren't we competing? And we're like, we all believe that all ships rise together. So like, let's support each other and amplify each other. And the reality is I want more people doing this work. I want, people like the Saterman Connect group and the Equality Institute group and Jennifer Brown's team and so on. Like, I want all those teams doing the work. And so, yeah, I guess we compete in some ways, but it's more about like, how are we all champions for making the world a better place?
Yeah, I agree. I used to definitely have, feel threatened by competitors, but I haven't felt that way in years, fortunately, because I read You're a Badass at Making Money and I did all the exercises.
I love it. I love it. Well, earlier you told me that you also had a great business coach that told you needed to create your own model, I think. And so I think this is one of my tabs here. I love people that you joined this conversation. We are just going all over the place: books, therapy, real life, real humans, mental health, all the things. So there's the ARC method. So ask, respect, connect.
That's right.
I said backwards for the people on the screen. It might be, but
no, it's not.
It works. Okay, fantastic. So ask, respect, connect, inclusive culture. So tell us about this model.
Okay. So what I believe in the conversations I've had is that I have conversations with a lot of well-meaning people who want to do the right thing. They want to say the right thing related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they're afraid of getting it wrong. They're afraid of moving in the wrong direction. And so there tends to be stagnation. And this can come into play in a lot of different contexts. It can come into play with DEI initiatives. It can come into play with one-on-one conversations, and even speaking up if we hear microaggressions. And so what I believe is, if we don't know what to say and we don't know what to do, what we should do is ask a question. And so the ARC method is my contextual model, which can move people and organizations from problem to solution and help you get clarity in any situation. So when you use the ARC method in these 3 different contexts, which I'll tell you about in a minute, you use the ARC method in these 3 different contexts. The bullseye, the target in the middle, is an inclusive culture. And so the first context of the ARC method is to assess where your organization is at by asking questions. And the book is full of the types of questions that you can ask to really assess where your organization's at and benchmark. Then you move on to so the A is ask, you move on to the R, which is about respecting the answers, respecting the data, respecting the stories that you hear, respecting that this is a process. And then the C is the connect. So ask, respect, connect. The C is about solutions. It's about accountability. It's about change. So we're connecting to real systemic change. So that's one of the applications, is about evaluating your organization and moving from problem to solution. Another application of the ARC is in a one-on-one conversation with someone. So, for example, for a long time, I thought I was an ally of Black people, but I was always afraid of saying the wrong thing. And so I wouldn't say anything. I was afraid of accidentally offending someone. So even if there was like a Black Lives Matter rally or a fundraiser for an inner city school or something, I'd be like, I have my thing. I do the gay thing. That's my thing. And I stayed silent in my lane. But what I realized is that I wasn't truly an ally for Black people at all. And I wasn't, because I was afraid of getting it wrong. And what I should have done instead was ask a question. And we use the ARC method to ask a question to build a better relationship with someone. And you can ask a question, something like, can you tell me what your experience has been like at this organization? You can ask a question like, can you tell me more about how you celebrate holidays, how you celebrate your culture? Those are the types of open-ended questions that you can ask. That's the A. The R is respect. It's about respecting the answer, respecting the stories that you hear, staying present. And then C is connect. It's about fulfilling the promise. It's about following through. And you can connect by saying something really simple like, wow, I had no idea. Thanks for letting me know. And they're conversation starters in the book for using the ARC in these contexts. And the final context is you can use the ARC method to speak up against a microaggression. If you witness something offensive, if you witness something that could be perceived as harassment or just a microaggression. So you can use the ARC method as an ally by starting with asking a question. So I'm not going to take you through that third context of the arc, but you get the gist that you use the arc in these 3 different contexts, and it takes you from problem to solution. It moves you forward in a progressive way with an ultimate goal of building a more inclusive culture. So those of you watching, you can download the ARC method cheat sheet on my website, theequalityinstitute.com/ARC, A-R-C, with those conversation starters.
I love it. I love it. Well, and what I hear there is that a core philosophy behind the ARC method is curiosity.
That's right.
And leaning in from curiosity is, and I find that I try to use that myself just in this work of, you know, are there things that I hope that I know or believe that I know or that I can offer as an area of expertise? I hope so, because I get paid for it, right?
That's right.
And we're talking about humans, and there's always something new to learn. And so leaning in from curiosity, from openness, from willingness to learn, like those are essential. And those built for, I think, you know, for the way I talk, the language I use is, and we use some of our programs, we actually call it this, which is we build bridges of trust. And if you start from like, I want to learn more about you, that is one way. And I'd love to share about me, like that authentic mutual sharing and openness creates trust.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And psychological safety. And I mean, it creates a whole lot of things, which is where you get to the financial benefits of diversity. You know, all the promised financial business case benefits of diversity don't work unless there's that trust, unless there's that psychological safety, unless everyone feels empowered to be authentic and bring their big ideas.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, it doesn't mean that we're always going to agree with each other.
Absolutely
it doesn't
not.
mean that every idea is going to get just like going to get the yes or the green light.
There's going to be more conflict, actually.
True. And so then you have to find ways to navigate that. Mm-hmm. Does the ARC method help with the navigating the conflict?
No.
It's not a superpower.
No.
We got to have a bit of humor.
Who do you think I am? I don't have all the answers.
I love it. Well, and you know, I think it is that though even though the ARC method isn't the solution for it, it is when you create an environment that you can use that you're using that way of communicating and connecting with others, that you've already developed, hopefully, a mutual respect and trust. So that way that you can navigate that conflict together in a healthy way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's going to happen, and there's always, everyone has stuff going on. And we all have our own versions of my divorce story, you know, that are the things in the back of our brain that prevent us from being present. But what I really believe is that when leaders talk about that stuff too, and when leaders talk about their misses, their mistakes, what's going on in their life that leads to imbalance, then we can all start to talk about that. We can all start to kind of just dump it out so it's not up here. And then all the other stuff starts to flow as well. And it's imperfect. It can get messy. It can definitely get vulnerable, but that's where the innovation happens, is the results of all of that pre-work.
Absolutely.
By the way, I mean, these concepts on psychological safety, Amy Edmondson is the pro on this, and LaTanya Wilkins, who's my friend, your friend, has a book called Leading Below the Surface, which just came out, and that's all about psychological safety. So they can definitely talk about this much better than I can. It's talked about in Inclusive 360, but they're the pros.
Yeah, well, we can't be the experts at everything, Bernadette.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to share mine first, but I'm going to ask you as we wrap up here, I'm going to have 2 more questions for you. One is what is your favorite page and Inclusive 360. And then the second is we're going to wrap up with our 5 favorite things from our conversation. So I have not read every page of this book, so I will fully own that first. However, I did open to this page earlier, as I showed you, and I'm like, let's just pee in peace. And so I love this. I also love, there's a section here that talks about the importance of diaper changing tables being in men's rooms as well. And when I think of, I'm not a dad yet, but like when I am, I hope that if I have a baby, I want to be able to take care of what their needs. And we perpetuate stereotypes when we don't equalize that solution. So there you go. This is page 210.
And those are examples of how inclusion is broader than just HR. So, and why the book is called that. So the epilogue of my book is on belonging. And so the concept is, if you do the stuff in this book, the holy grail, like the aspirational goal, is a culture of belonging within your organization. And that's what we should strive for. And so the book is written in a very practical way, right? So there's lots of solutions, but the epilogue is aspirational. And the epilogue really is me. It is who I am. It is my vision of the world. I'm a total optimist, idealistic person. And so I think the whole epilogue, and it ends with Amanda Gorman's quote from the inauguration: "For there is always light if we are only brave enough to see it, if we're only brave enough to be it." Will you commit to being Inclusive 360? Will you be that light? So I end the book on this sense of hope, this sense of aspiration, the sense of inspiration, because that is what I have to offer the world.
I love that. And I love Amanda Gorman's quote is such a beautiful message there. Will you be that light? Okay, this is a lightning round of 5 favorite things. So Bernadette, what were your 5 favorite things from our conversation today?
I think like the riffing about entrepreneurship, talking about scarcity mindset, talking about the importance of vulnerability, talking about the excruciating process of bringing a book into the world. And I love talking about my book. So, just because I really do believe in it. I really, really know that it can make a difference in the world. So thank you for letting me talk about my book. So, 3, 4, and 5 are different parts of talking about my book.
Yeah, I love that. I think the other thing that I would mention that I really love, I love that we just got real, like we're real humans. And we also talked about the work-life fit or work-life integration or work-life balance, whichever phrase works for you, of, hey, sometimes we all have to unplug because the well-being is important for all of us. So absolutely
is.
Well, Bernadette, I am so proud of you. Congratulations. Thank you for bringing Inclusive 360 to the world. And thank you for the work that you do to make the world a better place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Brian. I love talking to you, and thank you for all you do to build a more inclusive world.
It's going to take all of us, so we're in it together. So
bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe. Be well. Bernadette, enjoy your vacation in February. And we'll leave everyone with be the light. Bye, everyone.
Bye.